Why do you think the European Union has now come out to say that Putin has shifted the combat into a war against the West and NATO? And what do you think Russia's reaction will likely be?
Well, I think the big reason that they've said that is because of just the indiscriminate nature that he goes after targets and the way that he rattles sabers towards the West. I mean, we see overtures of this throughout everything that he's doing. But, I also think a lot of this is Putin trying to just convince even his own countrymen that he has things under control. Because if you look at it, the unified resistance that's taking place in Ukraine is having a profound effect on the Russian ability to advance. I mean, as they go into their second winter, I think they're being bled out, death by 1,000 cuts. So a lot of this, I think, is semantics.
And the WHO also updating the stockpile medicine lists to include medications for radiation. Should people be concerned about a possible nuclear war?
Well, look, anytime you have armed incursions into countries like Ukraine by Russia, we should all be concerned that this thing can escalate, very, very quickly. Let's not forget that a world war started by the assassination of an archduke, right? I mean, it can go from 0 to 90 really fast. And so I think all of that is prudent and smart. But I do think that the Ukrainian resistance right now and the way that they are jamming Putin's forces up, they're relying on conscripts. I mean, even a renewed offensive, I'm not trying to make light of it, but I think it's going to be a very, very tall order for him to do that, to push much deeper with the forces that he's got.
And we know the U.S. is finally sending 31 of those Abrams advanced battle tanks. How exactly will these benefit Ukraine?
Well, I mean, it's a state-of-the-art tank, first of all, and any of the systems that come from the United States are going to have a prolific effect if employed properly. And the thing is that we have to understand as a nation is any time that we up the ante with contributions to Ukraine, particularly with offensive weapons, that the stakes go up, and we have to make that calculus very, very carefully as we do this. And, it's one thing to have, for example, anti-aircraft missiles, which arguably are non-offensive, they're defensive in nature. But then when you start putting battle tanks that enhance the maneuver of the Ukrainian forces, the stakes do indeed go up and the consequences go up as well.
Do you expect Russia to ramp up attacks and try to gain more territory before the tanks will arrive in Ukraine?
Could you say that again? I'm sorry.
Do you expect Russia to ramp up attacks to try to gain more territory perhaps before the tanks will arrive in Ukraine?
I think they would love to ramp up and gain more territory, but they seem very, very challenged to do that. I think, again, the resistance that's being put forward by the Ukrainians is really effective. And, don't forget, we're in winter right now, and most of the forces that Russia's relying on are conscripts. These are, third and fourth string players that have been forcibly, put into service. So as much as they would love to gain territory, and they probably will gain some, I suspect when you're prosecuting a war with conscripts, the odds of having a rapidly advancing gain, particularly in the winter, are going to be very minimal.
And Scott, I wanted to ask you as well, General Michael Minahan, head of the Air Mobility Command overseas, we're also tracking this story. He says it is possible there will be war with China by 2025, instructing his troops to be prepared for that. Can you explain the context around that? It seems like it sort of came out of the blue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to speculate on what a four-star general would put out there in terms of readiness of his troops. I mean, leaders do this all the time. Usually that kind of information is classified. That's another reason I'm not going to speculate on it. However, I would say that, Air Mobility Command really is primarily responsible for air mobility. And so I think I wouldn't take too deeply those insights into a time frame that we're going to be at war with China. I would look more to the intelligence community for that. Certainly, I would look for maneuver commands that would be talking about that. The Air Mobility Command is to move, goods and people around the world in a mobility kind of fashion. So I wouldn't put like a ton of stock in that. I think probably what he was doing was to just really talk seriously about the readiness of his unit and to make sure that they're taking it seriously. What I worry more about is the fact, honestly, that we have rapidly growing extremist organizations in Afghanistan, 27 since we've left there, violent extremist groups to include Al-Qaeda and ISIS. We're not even talking about right now. And I think they have a much higher propensity to hit the U.S. than China and Russia.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.